Welcome to this tutorial on the Glossary Converter app. The Glossary Converter app is a robust little application that can be used to convert spreadsheets and glossaries and term bases into quite a few file formats. Don't be fooled by the simplicity of the look of this application. It can do a lot in terms of converting glossaries. And best of all, it's free. In this tutorial, we're going to cover the following aspects of working with the Glossary Converter app. We'll start out by getting your user interface language set to your preferred language, if that language is available. We'll move next to looking at settings for the conversion of file formats, basic settings. After that, we'll move on to looking at how to set up fields or data categories within the Glossary Converter app so that those fields are converted correctly or according to your needs and wants when you convert a spreadsheet or a term base into another file format. After that, we'll take a look at how to set up spreadsheets for conversion, both simple spreadsheets that only contain one term for a concept per language, and more complex spreadsheets that contain multiple terms, multiple synonyms for a concept in each of the languages of your glossary. Finally, I'll point you in the direction of some help materials that you can access in order to facilitate your experience working with the Glossary Converter app. So this is just a reminder, if you are enrolled in the LOC 501 Terminology for Beginners course, you have amongst your course contents the written work instruction upon which this tutorial is based. So if you happen to prefer reading through a work instruction rather than following along with a video, just head on over to your course contents, get the work instruction. You can download it and search it and use it while you're working with the app. Of course, you'll need to start off by downloading the Glossary Converter app itself. You can do so from the RWS App Store. I'll share the link where you can access the application in the comments to this video. You'll need to download and install the application, and once you've installed and opened the application, you're going to see the small home window of the application where you have an in space that indicates the file formats you have enabled as inputs for the app. We can see SDLTB and a spreadsheet format enabled here. Then there's the out space that indicates the output file formats that you have enabled for conversion within the Glossary Converter app. There's settings. We're going to be looking at settings quite a lot today. And then there are some features that aren't covered in this tutorial, but that you can explore on your own, such as merging spreadsheets and term bases and glossaries, enabling history of files, filtering glossaries. And so you'll just want to be aware of those things and explore them on your own. So let's take a look at what it looks like to just go through a simple conversion process. I've got my loc terms for Glossary Converter app in term-based format here. What I'm simply going to do is I'm going to drag and drop this file format into the Glossary Converter app. You can see the configuration of this term base here. I've got my various fields or data categories at the concept, language and term level. I've got a few terms within this term base as well. So now we just want to see what does it look like when we take this term base and we drag and drop it into the Glossary Converter app to convert it, in this case, into a spreadsheet. So I'm just going to go and take the file and drag it into the Glossary Converter app. You can see the Glossary Converter app gives you a progress report along the bottom of the application. And then very quickly, I have my conversion files. I've got a spreadsheet format that has been output, and then I've also got a report log. Now the spreadsheet format looks like this. It looks great. No, that we were that easily able to take a term base and convert it into spreadsheet format. I've hidden some of the fields and data categories in this spreadsheet that don't contain information, just so we can get a full view of the spreadsheet and the contents of it. And then the application also generates this conversion report where we're learning about the number of entries that were converted, the number of terms that were converted. There were 0 errors in our conversion process, and so we've got a good report here of how the conversion went in order to be able to confirm that our conversion was successful. The next thing we'll take a look at is how to set the user interface language to your preferred language if your preferred language is available as a localization for the Glossary Converter app. So we're going to ease our way into the settings. I've just opened the settings of the Glossary Converter app, and now I'm pointing out the left navigational menu associated with the settings where you can navigate around to different setting groups. We want user interface in this case, and once I select user interface, you can see the settings associated with user interface in the right side of the application where I can adjust the UI language. Languages available at this time include English, Bulgarian, Simplified Chinese, Danish, Dutch, French, German, Italian, Polish, Russian, Spanish, Swedish, and Turkish. So the Glossary Converter app could use localization into more languages. In the help module that we can access via the Glossary Converter app, under localization, you learn how you can reach out to the developer if you are interested in localizing the Glossary Converter app to another language. All right, so we'll keep working on our settings now. The next set of settings that we're going to look at pertain to the conversion of file formats. So we're going to look at the basic settings that you should establish in order to start converting different file formats using the Glossary Converter app. So I'm back to my settings menu. Right now in my left navigation menu, I have formats selected, and there are a variety of specific file formats for which I can adjust different settings. For right now, I'm going to focus upon the general formats settings. This is where I'm going to tell Glossary Converter the inputs that I'm going to drag into the application and the preferred output that I have when I drag a specific file type into the application. Right now I have my application set up to convert multi-term term bases to Excel spreadsheets, and Excel spreadsheets are set up to convert to multi-term XML format. This is not actually the format that I want. What I want Glossary Converter to do is to convert spreadsheets to multi-term term bases. However, this is just a little bug with the app where often the term base is automatically reverted to an XML file format. So just be aware that this is a setting that you'll have to revisit pretty often. So what I'm going to do in order to adjust this, I'm just going to go to the output and I'm going to select term base from the list. I'll add the term base to the list. So now I've got it set up so that Excel spreadsheets are converted into multi-term term bases. And again, just be aware this is a setting that you're going to have to establish multiple times if you're working with spreadsheets being converted into multi-term term bases. Next, I can go to my file settings. This is where I can tell the application where I want the output file to be generated. Do I want it in the same folder as the input file? Do I want to send it to a different folder? If I want to do that, I can select the second option, create output in this folder. I'm going to leave it the way that it is so that the outputs go in the same folder. I always think it's a good idea too to select the checkbox for ask before replacing a file that already exists in a folder. Next, I'll head over to my general settings, and under creation user, I'm going to update the username from Glossary Converter to my name. I'm going to do this because I'd like to have the Glossary Converter app associate my username with entries that are generated, if I have the file format settings established so that history is being associated with a entry upon conversion. And so I'm just going to put my name under the creation user here. The last thing that I have to do is just click OK, and that will get me out of the settings and ready to convert files. Now let's take a look at the settings for fields or data categories within the Glossary Converter app. This part of the tutorial takes a look at how to configure your fields so that they are organized and allocated to the correct level of your output file, whether that's the concept level, the language level, or the term level, and so that the contents of the fields are configured in the way that you want. So I'm back in my settings. This time I'm in fields, and the way that the fields settings are configured is as a table where the first column on the left is the name of the data category, the second column is the field type, the third column is the contents of the field, and the fourth column is for languages. I can select fields just by clicking upon them. I can also ignore fields by toggling the ignore button on and off. This would prevent Glossary Converter from including the field during the conversion process. To add a field, I'm going to click Add. That's going to open up a dialog box in which I can input the field name. I'll input a field name such as test, click OK, and that will add the field to my field settings. Once I have the new field added, I need to tell the Glossary Converter app at what level of the glossary it needs to go. So I can do this by just clicking on the field itself and then going over to the box for fields in the right navigation menu, where I can select entry level, I can select index level. Index level is for the language level, or I can select term level. That's just going to tell the Glossary Converter app at what level of the glossary to organize the field. Another way that I can do this is by simply right-clicking on the field type label within the list, and then I can select from among the different field types in this list. In this case, I'm going to use the entry field. I'll click OK. Now let's add a language to our list. I'll do this the same way by clicking Add, adding the name of the language. And then I can select the language button, which will open up a dialog box where I can select the language of the field. Glossary Converter does a good job of matching fields to the list of languages within the application. So if you use a language name or an ISO language code, it's likely that the Glossary Converter app will automatically identify which language your field refers to. Here we can see our new language has been added to the app. Next, we'll want to set the type of contents that we want to associate with our fields. The contents of the fields are listed in the third column from the left of the field settings. Just by browsing around the list, we can see some of the different field types, including text, pick lists. We can make a field Boolean, where the answer can either be yes or no, or true or false. And to set the contents of a field, I'm just going to highlight the field I'd like to configure. I'm going to go click the Contents button, and that will give me this multiple choice list where I can select the content type for the field. I can make the field a Boolean, again, yes or no, true or false. I can make the field a date. I can make the field a place where media can be attached to the entry. The field can be a number, it can be a simple text box. In this case, let's go with pick list. So I select pick list. A dialog box automatically opens where I can input the values of my pick list. So I'll input my values, adding one value per line, click OK, and now my field has been set as a pick list. The next thing we're going to look at is how to configure a simple spreadsheet for conversion by establishing our settings both in the Glossary Converter app and by configuring the actual contents of a spreadsheet for conversion. So I have a simple spreadsheet here. When I say a simple spreadsheet, I mean that I only have one term per language in the spreadsheet. In this case, my spreadsheet is so simple that it only has 4 fields in total. I have the field for the term in English, the field for the term in Spanish, a field for the category of the term, and a field for notes. So when I drag this into the Glossary Converter app, it's going to take some of those fields that it doesn't recognize and ask me how I want to configure them. Now, I always need to have languages and at least one language associated with a glossary that I'm converting. So I'm just going to set up my Glossary Converter app so that my term ENUS is associated with the English language, and so that my term ESMX is associated with the Spanish language. Now I'll drag my spreadsheet into the Glossary Converter app. We'll see the progress bar at the bottom of the Glossary Converter app home window. When the glossary has finished converting, I can go and open that newly created term base in multi-term. So here's the term base in multi-term. All of my terms have been imported successfully. I'm really happy to see that. I'm happy to see that my data category of category has been configured correctly. One thing that I don't like about the configuration of the term base is the name of the language level. Right now, the name of the language level is term ENUS and term ESMX, and that's just not accurate. If I happen to have multiple terms associated with a concept entry, multiple term blocks associated with a concept entry, that label wouldn't be accurate just by virtue of it being singular. And the language level shouldn't be named term. So I'm going to do some configuration of my spreadsheet in order to get the correct output. What I'll do is I'll just go back into my spreadsheet and I'm just going to change the name of the header to ENUS for English and ESMX for Spanish. Even though that's the name of the language, how the Glossary Converter app works is that it will read the name of the language, or in this case the ISO codes for the language, as the space for the actual terms. And so now that I've reconfigured this, I can go and do my conversion once again. And here I get a multi-term term base that's got the language level named correctly. Now we'll take a look at converting spreadsheets that contain synonyms, spreadsheets that are more complex in nature because they contain multiple ways of naming a concept within a single language. So I'll head over to my spreadsheet settings within the Glossary Converter app. Within these settings, the settings at the top of the dialog box are the settings that are associated with converting term bases to spreadsheet format. The settings that I want to concentrate on are the settings under synonyms in Excel tables. And the first time that I work on converting a spreadsheet with synonyms in it, I'm going to select the option of the multi-column format for processing that file, or a format that has one column per synonym. So once I've got that setting established, I need to head over to my spreadsheet to make sure that it's configured correctly. And I've updated the first entry within my spreadsheet so that it contains synonyms, so that it's got multiple terms associated with the concept in English and Spanish. I've got LocEssentials and Localization Essentials at both the English and Spanish levels. They have term descriptions associated with them where the term description is telling me that the term is either the short form or the full form. And so I'm just configuring my headings so that I have ENUS as the name for the term, no matter if it's the short form or the full form. And then I've got description after the term column where I'm indicating whether the term is the short form or the full form. Those data categories or those fields are all being named the same way, no matter what. And I'm just including all of the term level columns one after the other in order to indicate which are my term blocks. In this case, LocEssentials is a term block. Localization Essentials is a term block, and all of the data categories associated with that just come after the term level data category. The same for Spanish. LocEssentials is a term block, Localization Essentials is a term block, and then I've got my category and my notes data categories as well. So this term base is now ready for conversion. When I convert the term base, you'll notice that it's pulled the synonyms in correctly just by understanding that these synonyms and the data categories associated with them were organized into multi-columns for a term block. I've got my description, LocEssentials is the short form, Localization Essentials is the full form. A second way that I can set up my spreadsheet to recognize synonyms is by selecting full support, one row per entry, and I'm using in this case the separator of a pipe. You can use any separator that you want, but it's really important that you make note that in this case we're using a separator of a pipe. So this is what that option looks like when I've set up my spreadsheet to match the configuration option. Now I'm only including one column for my terms in each language. I'm only including one column for each of the term level data categories. And what I'm doing is I'm using that pipe as a separator. So LocEssentials and Localization Essentials are in a single cell separated by a pipe. In the description column, short form and full form are included together, separated by a pipe. And what the glossary converter will do is it will recognize that whatever comes before the pipe belongs in a term block, and whatever comes after the pipe belongs in a term block as well. And I could have as many data categories as I want if I wanted to have additional fields or additional synonyms. I would just build those out, adding additional columns and adding additional pipes separating out my data. That's going to convert in the exact same way, where I'll get a separate term block for LocEssentials and a separate term block for Localization Essentials with the correct contents at the description data category associated with the term block. All right, let's get into some final tips for working with the Glossary Converter app, including how to access help documentation, how to use the toggle tooltip, and more. So I'm back in my settings of the Glossary Converter app, and this time we're going to pay attention to the bottom navigational menu where I can toggle the question mark on and off. That's the toggle tooltip. When that's enabled, the system will give you more information when you hover over different settings. I can save my settings of the Glossary Converter app in XML format. I can load previously saved settings. I can also click the Help button to open up the Help module associated with the app. The developer of this application has also created a full online repository of documentation related to helping you use the Glossary Converter app. We were just looking at some synonym settings. You can check out more information on that in this online repository. You can also learn how to do other actions using the Glossary Converter app, such as merging glossaries, filtering glossaries. So head over to the online documentation to learn about these aspects of working with the Glossary Converter. As a reminder, if you're enrolled in LOC 501 Terminology for Beginners, you also have a written work instruction upon which this entire tutorial has been based. So if you prefer reading through instructions rather than following along with a video, or if you want to reference this documentation just to learn how to do one specific activity, you can just head on over to your course contents, download this work instruction, and use it while you are working with the Glossary Converter app. That concludes this tutorial on working with the Glossary Converter app.